All right. So, hello, I am Linda Heitzman Powell, and I serve as the chair of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being held remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Denise Seisman.
Here.
Allison Bell.
Here.
Kelly Harrison.
Here.
Emily Kessler.
Here.
Pamela Neidert.
Here.
Christy Marie Steele.
Here.
Stephanie Wiley.
Here.
Mike Williams.
Here.
And Alice Zhang.
I don't see Alice, but I'll keep an eye out on the waiting room in case she
All
enters.
right, thank you. I note the following BSRB staff members are also present: David Fye.
Here.
And Leslie Allen.
Here.
All right, next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or COMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at this meeting as no individuals requested to provide public comment. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Access to this meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication, allowing members of the public without cost to attend the meeting either through the conference call or by viewing the YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of COMA are not suspended. As such, we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the COMA. On June 28th, 2024, we sent notice of the meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of such meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website at ks.bsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may also request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office or send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And Linda, I did check the conference call line before we got started. There's no one currently on the line, but if I hear someone beep over, I will let you know.
All right, thank you, David. The meeting is now called to order, and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on the agenda, which is an approval of the agenda. Does everybody have that up?
I don't think I received copies of materials for today's meeting. Could those be sent to me by chance?
Sure, I can send those to you. Those were sent out, I believe, on Wednesday, but I'll go ahead and send another copy to you.
Okay,
Do you
yeah.
have a new, Kelly, do you have a new email address?
I do, but I think David usually uses my personal email, which is the KLHarrison0012@gmail, which is fine. That's a great one.
Okay.
It's the most consistent one.
Actually,
So
Kelly, it looks, David, that email looks like it went to Kelly at your KU email. Kelly. Oh, I didn't get it.
Okay, yeah. Yes, I don't have access to the KU email anymore. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't realize until I was logging on that I didn't have those.
No problem. I'll go ahead and forward a copy of them to you.
Thank you.
So since we have a quorum, should we wait for Kelly to receive those so she can legitimately vote on approving the agenda?
It's up to you. I could also share a copy of the agenda so everybody could see that if that would be helpful.
Yeah, do you want to do that?
Sure. Yeah.
While we're waiting for the materials to reach Kelly via cyberspace?
Sure. I'll go ahead and share my screen here, and you can all see a copy of the agenda. Okay.
So we're on item number 2, agenda approval. And then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. Have you gotten the information yet, Kelly? Nope. Then we'll have David's executive director report, followed by old business, which is talking about the survey. And then we'll move into new business with regards to advisory committee membership. We have a couple of applicants. Then we're going to look at possible recommendations to the board for the legislative agenda, look at regulation of artificial intelligence, discuss adding descriptions of each professions to the BSRB website, and then discussion on what we would like our topics to be for 2024, followed by our next meeting time and adjournment. So if there's any additions to the agenda, I'll entertain that now. Or I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you,
And
Allison.
I've got the material, so I will second.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nay. Okay, motion carries. All right, David. Thank you. So now if y'all will review the minutes from last meeting and see if they're good or if there's any corrections to be made.
Will motion to approve the minutes.
Thank
Christy
you,
Steele.
I'll second.
Thanks, Allison. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you, guys. Now I'll open the meeting up to David and his executive director's report.
Okay. Well, thank you, Linda. And I'll go ahead and just pause here. And normally in this part of the meeting, I go through some updates for BSRB operations and some agenda items. I did want to highlight that the last board meeting, we did have a change in board membership. And so Jackie Lightcap did come off the board, and we have a new board member, Denise. And Denise, please let me know, your last name, is it Seisman?
Sisman.
Sisman. Okay. And so Denise will be serving as the new board public member for the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee, as well as the Addiction Counseling Advisory Committee. So do you want to tell the members of the advisory committee a little bit about yourself, or your background, or your interest in serving on the board or advisory committees?
Sure. So very glad to be here and very happy to be serving on this board and this advisory committee. I have had a lifelong interest and passion about behavioral health, including mental health and substance use disorder, both affected on a personal level and also have worked professionally in those areas. The bulk of my work has been in public health at the state, local, and federal level, and recently came to Kansas about 10 years ago, where I had the chance to be the CEO of the Community Care Network of Kansas, which is the primary care association for Kansas, and dealt a lot with integrated behavioral health in that world. I'm currently serving as the executive director of the Kansas chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And again, I'm just really happy to be here, and let me know if there's anything that you need from me, and I'm interested in serving alongside of you all.
Welcome, Denise. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll move to some BSRB other operations now. There have been quite a few items we've been working on behind the scenes as we've wrapped up the end of the fiscal year. One item you probably won't see a lot of, but every year, every state agency has to submit a revised budget estimate for the current fiscal year, and then at least a estimated budget for the next fiscal year, sometimes two. So this year I'll be working on submitting that by the deadline of September 15th. So I'll be making changes to the current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 25, and then also putting together a budget for the BSRB for fiscal year 26 and 27. Another update I want to provide to you is that we are getting very close to launching services through a company called CE Broker to help us with some of our audits. For some of you that are relatively new to the board of the advisory committee, CE Broker is a company that provides services to state licensing boards in Kansas with the Board of Healing Arts and Board of Nursing currently, and outside of Kansas and a few other states. And how that works is the company is able to provide a free service to licensing agencies, and then free accounts to license holders, so that when you complete your continuing education hours and you have that documentation that shows you've completed those hours, you can upload it to a portal so that it is available when when you go to renew. We audit 10% of all licensees. And so if you are taking advantage of that CE Broker account and uploading that documentation, then if you are selected for audit, we can just enter the portal, verify that you've completed all of your hours, and then process that audit very quickly. It'll make things much more efficient than the current process of sending things back and forth to the board office. We'll still be reviewing those and making the determination, but it should cut down the time. And it also provides a nice service for licensees. You don't have to just hold on to all those records yourself. As I mentioned, it's a free service. We will be probably launching that in the next month. And given that we have 7 professions under the BSRB, they decided to go ahead and start that rollout one profession at a time. So the first one will be professional counseling. The second one will be social work, and then the other professions will follow and along those lines in the future. So I will let you know when we're getting close to the behavior analyst profession, but I just want to put it on your radar if you see news about that. It's going to be a rollout of 1 or 2 professions at a time, but ultimately we'll get to the point where we have all 6 or all 7. And then once all 7 are open for licensees, as I mentioned, it is an optional service. So any individuals who don't want to sign up for an account, you're free to do that. But I do think it'll be to your advantage to do so. And that'll be something we'll make you aware of. The way that company actually makes profit is they offer some higher tier services, and they have enough individuals voluntarily sign up for those higher tier paid services, but that's how they make a profit through this process. But we made sure in our agreement with them that licensees had no obligation to sign up for those upper tier. It is purely free unless people want to take advantage of their extra services they offer. So I think that'll be a nice thing for everyone. Moving to some items from the last board meeting on July 8th. That was when the last board meeting took place. We've introduced you to the new board public member, Jackie Lightcap, who did not seek reappointment to a second term. She had previously been a public member on the board, and so happy to be working with Denise now. Actually, I saw Mike, you have a hand up, so I'll go ahead and take your question. Do you have a question?
This computer's getting ready to die, so I need to switch to my other one here. So
okay.
I'm going to take off, and then please let me back in.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. I'll keep an eye on the waiting room. So, I'll go back to the updates from the board meeting. As we talked about at some of the last advisory committee meetings, Kansas does not require passage of a jurisprudence exam for licensure, but a lot of other states do for some of the professions that we oversee. The jurisprudence exam is basically a way that we can ensure that licensed applicants are familiar with the laws in Kansas as well as their responsibilities. We proposed an alternative solution to it that is somewhat innovative, and that is instead of making it a requirement and then treating it like an examination or a test, we're going to try to do it as a voluntary process and then roll it out hopefully later this year, an hour at a time for each of the professions, and sort of have some fun with it. Make it more of an interactive learning tool and do it sort of like a webinar where people can attend and can vote on the questions as they go through and essentially respond to the questions that are part of that jurisprudence process. And then we will take your attendance through that, and anyone who attends will get an hour of continuing education credit. So we had talked about that model to all the advisory committees. We brought that back to the board. The board is supportive of that. So we'll be trying to launch that alternative jurisprudence approach sometime later this fall. At the board meeting, also every July board meeting, the board elects a chair and a vice chair. And for the last 2 years, Mary Jones, the marriage and family therapist on the board, had served as board chair. She decided to step out of that role to allow other people the opportunity to lead. And the board elected Dave Anderson as the new chair of the board. So congratulations to Dave. Dave is a master's level psychologist in that profession. He is actually a licensed clinical psychotherapist. And then the board elected Laura Shaughnessy as the new vice chair of the board. Laura Shaughnessy is a professional counselor, a licensed clinical professional counselor. And so congratulations to Dave and Laura, and I'll be working with them in their new capacity for the next year. There were also appointments to 4 of the advisory committees, and about 3 of the others are still working on recommendations. So there are likely to be more appointments coming up on new members to the advisory committee in September. Additionally, this last year, the legislature passed a bill to have Kansas join the Social Work Multi-State Licensure Compact. This is a brand new compact for the social work profession. It is not yet operational. However, Kansas was the 7th state to pass the model legislation, and based on the language in the model bill, once 7 states pass it, there is authority for the Rules Committee to start meeting. So the next step was for every state to name a commissioner to operate on behalf of their state, attend those meetings, and work on the implementation of the compact. So the board did select me to be the compact commissioner for the social work compact. So I'll be attending those meetings and doing my best to make sure they have good rules in place, and hopefully we'll be able to get that compact up and running in the near future. Based on the time frame that I have seen from the Council for State Government, CSG, the time frame that they estimate is probably sometime later next year in 2025, calendar year 2025. Just based on the time frame of the other compacts, that does seem hopefully reasonable. The big thing we'll have to do is kind of work on fleshing out the rules within the compact structure, and then also working on a data system. So for that social work compact, we've talked a little bit about the way that it's structured is that it would allow states to begin to issue a brand new type of license. This new type of license would be called a multi-state license. And so right now, every state has authority to let people practice in their home state where they live. So we would offer a license in Kansas for people to practice in Kansas. If you want to practice in another state, more likely than not, you would have to get a license in that state. Under the social work compact, once it's all up and running, you would be able to get either a single state license to operate just in Kansas, or a multi-state license, which would allow you to operate not only in Kansas, but any other compact member state. So it will be a big change, but I think it'll be really beneficial in terms of practitioner mobility and also client mobility when people go on vacation or move. So it should be really nice. But just to let you know about the time frame for that one, probably sometime late next year is when they're thinking it'll be operational. Some other items from the board meeting. The board started to have a discussion about alias information for licensees. Right now, there is a process by which individuals can file complaints against practitioners, and to verify that they can file a complaint against the correct practitioner, we list aliases for licensees in our verification portal, so that when individuals change their name, the applicants can still know which individual provided services to them. However, we've received some requests for some of the alias information to be removed from the website. And the issue the board is considering is if any individuals had previous names that they did not practice under. So as a matter of public protection, we see the value in making sure that people know, this was the person that you received services under. But if someone had a previous name that wasn't related to the time period that they were licensed, is it feasible? Is it practical? Is it a good idea to go ahead and be able to remove that information from the portal? So the board is wrestling with that. We're waiting to hear back from our legal counsel with some other thoughts on that too. But that is something the board will continue to discuss at the September board meeting. Additionally, the board started to talk about possible changes to the advisory committee policy as far as advisory committee member expectations. Right now, the language of the advisory committee policy is just a little over a page, and most of it focuses on the purpose of the advisory committees to assist the board, and then to consider recommendations the board has referred to the advisory committees or to forward information back to the board in terms of recommendations. There is a little bit of information in terms of how members are selected, but in terms of the responsibilities of individual advisory committee members, there is a phrase in the policy that says the same policies and procedures that relate to board members should also apply to advisory committee members, but that sentence has never really fully been fleshed out in terms of what it means. For example, board members, if they attend a meeting approved by the board, are able to receive a small payment for attending those meetings. It's $35 per day, whether the meeting is 1 hour or whether it's 8 hours. And so board members do receive that small level of compensation, but advisory committee members are volunteering their time. So we know that all the policies and procedures don't relate. Similarly, board members in the statute, it says that board members have to be residents of the state of Kansas. However, the advisory committee policy, the question has been raised, do advisory committee members all have to live in the state of Kansas? And the policy does not say that. So basically what we've said is that you can consider that as something when you're reviewing applicants, but it's not a requirement that you have to live in the state of Kansas. So that is something for the board to consider. Also, one of the items for the board to consider is whether members of the advisory committee should all be licensees. That has been a question that's been raised in the past, and it doesn't say that in the policy. The majority of members of the advisory committee historically have been licensees, but they don't have to be according to the policy. It just doesn't say. So that's another thing that they're considering. And then also perhaps the number of absences. The expectations of board member document says board members should have no more than 1 unexcused absence per year, but there's nothing that talks about how many excused or unexcused absences in the advisory committee policy, nor what would constitute an excused absence. So another thing that could be on the table, but the board had a general discussion, did not make any official recommendations, but they may reapproach that in a future meeting, and it's possible they could make recommendations on those areas. Okay, moving now to just some dates for future meetings in case you are interested in following of the board. So the board generally meets the second Monday of the month every other month. So the next regular board meeting would generally be the second Monday in September. However, once a year, the board tries to have an all-day in-person meeting. And so that is scheduled for September as well. So instead of having the regular board meeting and then 2 weeks later having the off-site in-person meeting, the board decided to not have the regular meeting on the second Monday, but instead the plan is going to be to hold the regular board meeting the evening of Sunday, September 29th from 5:30 to 7:30, and that'll be in Lawrence. And then the following morning, the board will start their annual all-day meeting in person, which is also going to be in Lawrence. And so the information for the location is on the BSRB website, but essentially they'll have a shorter than normal 2-hour meeting on Sunday evening. And then the next day they will spend the majority of that day from about 9 o'clock until 3:30 talking about items that require more discussion or items potentially for the legislative agenda. Similarly, in November, we would normally have a meeting the second Monday of the month for the board, but that would fall on Veterans Day. So to allow board members the opportunity to attend ceremonies that day, or in case they work at a location that is closed for Veterans Day, that meeting has been moved. We've pulled board members so that November board meeting is going to be the first Monday of the month, which will be Monday, November 4th. And then I did want to let all of you advisory committee members know about 2 special meetings that we will be planning for the month of September. We will send out some notices about these as well. But last year we held a couple of special meetings for the first time. One was targeted towards educators for the different schools in the state of Kansas. It was an opportunity for us to have about an hour-long conversation where we presented information on recent changes to statutes affecting the professions that we regulate, and then we open it up for Q&A, and we're able to get some feedback from individual educators around the state. We also had a similar meeting for employers, mental health professionals in the state of Kansas, had about an hour-long meeting where we had some presentation information to them and then open it up for Q&A. Neither of these meetings are board meetings. They are actually put on by the BSRB staff. And so while a few board members may attend, the majority of this information is tried to basically do outreach on behalf of the BSRB as an agency to connect with the members of the educational community and also for the employers as well. So we are going to be doing that again this year. We have selected the dates for those 2 meetings. And as I mentioned, we'll put out some more information and try to reach out to representatives of schools about those. But those are going to take place on the one for educators will be Thursday, September 19th at 1 o'clock. And then the one for employers will be Friday, September 20th at 1 o'clock. And we'll try to allow or leave open a little bit more time for Q&A or any kind of feedback from individuals attending those meetings. But just to kind of summarize that, we are wanting to have those meetings again this year. We'll probably focus on some changes to the regulations that have occurred over the last few years. Last year, I focused on the statutes. This year, we'll talk about the regulation changes, but also want to get some feedback from educators and also employers. And so the one meeting for educators will be on Thursday, September 19th at 1 o'clock, and the meeting for employers will be Friday, September 20th at 1 o'clock. And I'll be sending out emails, but if anyone would like to contact me, we'll probably do it by Zoom, and we'll probably go ahead and record those meetings. As long as there's no issues, we'll go ahead and upload it afterwards to the BSRB YouTube channel so people can go back and watch afterwards as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and end my presentation and see if there's any questions.
All right. Since there's no questions, I want to say thank you very much, David, for all the hard work that you do for the citizens in the state of Kansas and for all of us professionals serving them. You do a great job.
Well, thank you, Linda. Appreciate that.
It's true. You're welcome. All right. So now I'd like to move on to old business. Continued discussion of the possible survey for behavior analysis. Do you guys all have those draft questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Linda, I can share my screen as far as those questions as well, if that would be helpful to go through those.
Thanks.
Let me pull up a Word copy in case we want to make any changes.
Thank you, David.
Sure. Okay. Can you see that okay? Or do I need to make the text a little bit bigger?
Can you all see it okay? Yep. Thanks, Kelly. Nice thumbs up.
Okay. Well, as we talked about in the past, the Social Work Advisory Committee has administered a survey of social workers a couple times, and we have reports on the information we were able to collect. Those have been largely really positive experiences. It gives us an opportunity to hear directly from licensees in terms of issues that our licensees are seeing in a number of different areas, but it also allows people to provide us feedback on any kind of topical issues too, such as multi-state compacts or other things that are relevant to the profession. So these are some draft questions for a survey for behavior analysts and licensed assistant behavior analysts. In general, the information, the individuals that we have jurisdiction over tend to be licensees. And so these are basically drafted with those 2 groups in mind. This introductory information just kind of describes that this is a survey of the BSRB, and the reason why we're collecting this information. And we also had heard that it might be helpful to kind of estimate how long it would take to complete the survey. And based on past surveys of this length, it probably takes about no longer than about 10 minutes, unless people really want to put a lot of information into some of the fields that are just open to type the answers in an open form. But some of the demographic questions we start with say, in what county or counties do you practice the profession of behavior analysis? And then do you practice in a predominantly urban area, rural area, or frontier area? And then this will allow us to kind of see the level of split between the assistant behavior analyst versus the licensed behavior analyst in Kansas. And then also there's a question here that says, how many years have you practiced behavior analysis? Combined years of experience if you have held both an LABA and an LBA. And then we kind of have some ranges there as far as how long people have practiced. Question number 5 says, including your LABA or LBA license in Kansas, how many permanent LABA or LBA licenses do you currently hold in the behavior analysis profession combined between all states? One thing, as we've been talking about the multi-state compact, is we know how many people are licensed here. We also know if they live in the state of Kansas or if they live outside the state of Kansas, but we don't really know how many of our licensees hold additional licenses in other states. So this would be sort of a helpful way of us kind of gauging perhaps interest in a multi-state compact if we find that our licensees hold a lot of different licenses. And so the next question is just for the LABAs. How many years have you held a licensed assistant behavior analyst license in Kansas? And then number 7, again, just for the LABAs who have had it for at least 2 years, are you taking steps to pursue a licensed behavior analyst or LAB license? If you are not taking steps to become an LBA, could you explain why you made that decision? So this is kind of similar to the conversation we've been having for some of the other professions. Kansas is a little unique in that we have 2 levels of permanent license for the professional counseling and the marriage and family therapy profession. Some other states only have 1 level of permanent license at the clinical level. So we thought this might be a helpful question to ask as well for the assistant behavior analyst to see if some of those individuals are not seeking to move on to an LBA, maybe some of the reasons why they would not be. So, and Allison, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
I do. I think it probably just needs to go get put on like future business or just question in general. But I have a friend that does behavior analytic work in the schools, and do they not have to get licensed if they work in the school district?
No.
That's something about why they would need to, why they're not pursuing it, and that's what made me remember I wanted to ask that question.
Currently, Allison, if you're working in the school, it's not a clinical service.
Okay.
It's an educational service, and so it's not covered by the licensing law. They were carved out when that licensing law went into effect. This is only for clinical licensure. Licensure is only for clinical services being provided in a clinical setting.
Okay. That makes sense. I just want that the way you worded that just reminded me about that question I had.
It would also require a change in IDEA because BCBA services are not a service provided under the IDEA, which is what special education falls under. And so that is another reason they don't have to be licensed, is because IDEA doesn't have that as a service provider.
So it's probably not a question for this, Emily, but are like SLPs required to be licensed and that sort of thing?
Yes, and in IDEA, there are related service providers that are listed. So like SLPs are listed as a service provider in IDEA. So are occupational therapists and some other like physical therapists and things. But board certified behavior analysts are not listed as a related service provider or anywhere defined. And so that is another reason why they don't have to be licensed in schools.
Okay, thank you.
Well, question number 8, it really goes towards, I've been working with a few different groups recently, and we've been trying to have a good discussion about workforce. And I think some of the issues have been that some of the mental health employers are trying to find individuals to employ to provide services, and they're struggling to find individuals to employ. But when I look at our license totals, I see that our licensees have increased significantly over the last 10 years, especially. Over the last 10 years, I think we've gone from something like 12,000 to almost 16,000. So, and when you look at the number of clinical level practitioners, at least for most of the professions, the number of clinical level practitioners has increased a lot as well. So when I'm looking at that narrative, I struggle when I hear some of the conversation about the workforce challenges and the lack of practitioners when I see how many more people are getting licensed. And so, but we've had a conversation about, not everyone who is licensed is providing direct care services to clients. And so we thought it might be a good opportunity in a survey like this to ask licensees in a traditional month, what percentage of your work involves providing direct services to clients? And we thought we might try to come up with a good definition to give people some examples of what that might include, because I wouldn't want people to exclude something like the time they spend on paperwork, because it wouldn't make sense for you to spend 100% of your hours just working directly with clients. You would need to have time for both, but that is really still under the umbrella of direct services. So we're trying to work on a good definition for that question, but hopefully this will allow us to start to get more data on maybe how many of our licensees are not providing direct services, or what percentage of their work involves providing direct services. So that's why this question is on there. It's kind of linked up with some of the conversations we've had outside of the advisory committees, but also for some of the other ones as well. Question number 9, currently no multi-state compact exists for the behavior analysis profession. But if a multi-state compact was created under a model that would allow individuals to practice in other compact states by changing from a single state license to a multi-state license at twice the cost of a traditional single state license, would you be interested in obtaining a multi-state license under such a compact? So there is no compact in the process right now for behavior analysis. And the 3 compacts that I have seen for the mental health professions are all designed differently. But I thought for the social work profession, perhaps this might be an opportunity for us to at least consider that model, and then at least give them some sort of an idea in terms of potential cost. And so given that scenario, would they be interested in switching from a single state license to a multi-state license in the event that a compact was created for behavior analysts?
And so I want everybody to think about this, because if you think about pre-licensing, our BCBA was national. We could go to any state as a BCBA and everybody knew what BCBA meant. And now it's up to the individual states for that licensing authority. So we don't want to make the survey so long that it is too cumbersome for folks to complete, but at the same time, trying to get information about, would people be interested in moving back to where they have the capacity to practice across states? So do you think this question gets at that? Does there need to be another question? What do you guys think about that?
And Pam, I see your hand up. Did you have a comment?
I was trying to figure out how to use the hand function. I heard Kelly get praised for doing it earlier. But I'm not as tech savvy. At any rate, the only thing that sort of, not a red flag, but I thought about when I was reading question 9, sorry, about the compact. I wondered whether, I wasn't sure this question would allow you to distinguish the potential reason for the answer in yes or no by the respondee in terms of like, is it a price thing or is it something about I don't want to do multi-site compacts? Does that make sense? And it sounds like I'm just wondering if we wanted to be a bit more ambiguous and it says like at twice the cost, as if like that's what it's going to be if we do it, kind of thing, versus a question, are you interested in obtaining a multi-site or multi-state compact multi-site license and maybe like it's at an increased cost or something like that, rather than a hard and fast it's going to be twice of what you're paying. Does that make sense? What at? Or I mean, you could divide it into two questions. But like Linda said, I agree. I think the shorter the better on the survey in terms of response rate.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly open to that. That was a question on the social work compact, or their question on their survey as well. And I don't know what the answer is. If it's better to give, here is a specific point so that you can evaluate under that scenario. Because you say at a higher cost, then they might say, well, it depends how high that cost was. And so, but I'm okay with either. Whatever you guys think would be best, I'm happy to word this question either way.
Well, let me ask this, because I don't know about the multi state compact. If it were 4 states, would that be 4 times as much as a single state? You see what I mean? Or is it as soon as the 4 would be the same as 2, would be the same as 7, so on and so forth?
Yeah.
Oh, so it really would just be twice the cost, period. Okay, that's a different thing. I was sort of thinking, well, what if you've got 15 states involved and it's going to be more than twice the cost, but it wouldn't.
Right. Yeah, and I think part of the reason a multi-state license would be more expensive is because right now we have licensees that live outside of the state of Kansas. And if we went to a model like this, we would expect those individuals that live in Kansas might pursue a multi-state license through the BSRB. But let's say that there's behavior analysts that live in Missouri that get the Missouri license and the Kansas license. Well, if they get a multi-state license in Missouri, they would likely let the Kansas license go away and just practice using one multi-state license. And so that's kind of one of the detractions from a model like this is you get the impression that you're going to lose a lot of your out-of-state licensees because it is to their benefit not to have to get licenses in all the different states. But losing that revenue, you need to be able to charge a higher price point for the multi-state license. And also it kind of makes sense because under this, you would have people from all those different states practicing into Kansas potentially through telehealth. And so you'd still be in charge of investigating complaints against all those people. And then when your licensees are providing services in all those states, you still could be receiving complaints against them as well. So there should be logically an increase in the number of investigations. So there's a reason why it'd be more expensive, but it doesn't have to be that. And we could change the wording so that it would just say, a single state license would be one cost. Alternatively, a multi-state license would be a higher cost. And so at a higher cost point, would you be interested in moving to a multi-state license?
Yeah, no, that background information is super helpful because I just made the assumption that the more states involved in the multi-state grouping, the higher the proportional cost. But if that's not the case, then I think the way it's worded, to be honest, is fine. That's what it would be,
And I thought, if you just say a single state license is this, a multi-state license is twice the cost, but you can practice in, potentially 49 states or, 50 states, depending on how many of them are going to license behavior analysts and how many of them join the compact, of course. But even if it is at a higher price point, you're probably saving money if you're someone who actually goes out there and gets a lot of those different types of licenses. And not to confuse the point too much, but this is modeled after the social work compact. The professional counseling compact is kind of what you were talking about, where you would still have to you have to pay something to each state you want to practice in. Because the professional counseling compact, you actually go and you get a privilege to practice in different compact states. And so you go through the compact and you say, I want to practice in this state, that state, and the other. And then based on how many of those states you want to practice in, you'd pay those individual compact privilege costs. And so there's different models, but I think the social work multi-state compact model is probably the one most people will be familiar with, just based on how many social workers there are. But
David?
Yep.
Oops. What I'm noticing with the questions, they're nice questions. They're very long. There's lots of commas and, extra information added in. And if someone's like trying to answer this quickly and not trying to do like a logic puzzle, especially for question number 9, even just like starting with multi-state compact, I think a lot of folks aren't even going to know what a compact is. And so I would like to volunteer, if it's okay with you and the committee, to like try to make these questions a little more like straightforward and clear, so that if someone's reading them quickly, it's easy to understand what's being asked. And then there's just like a couple of typos in here too that I can edit and send back, if that's okay with everyone.
I think that sounds great. Yeah.
Okay.
I do wonder if it's worth, but for question 9, adding, there was another question of higher up. I think that we asked like a why afterwards. Oh yeah, if you're not taking steps to be an LBA, could you explain why? And I wonder if we could capture something like that in question 9. Because I do think I imagine a lot of people will say unsure because multi-state licenses are so new. And I would love to hear like if somebody typed in like, I'm unsure because it depends on how much it costs, or it depends which states specifically are included, or that sort of thing, then we would know kind of if we want to move forward with this, what we need to touch on specifically.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. But you said it better, Kelly.
It could be like just a text box of like, if you'd like to provide more information about your answer, where it's not required, but if someone wants to explain why they said what they did, that might be informative.
Okay. Yeah, I think that sounds good. Because you're right, there could be lots of different reasons. It could be that they would, but that price point seems too high, or something like that. So, okay. And there are ways to do it where we could do a text box where people can answer things. And so, okay. Moving on to the next question, question 10. Over the past 2 years, based on your observations and experience practicing in the behavior analysis profession in Kansas, could you share information on any practice-related issues you've seen, such as areas where practitioners appeared to need more continuing education or training in a certain area? So again, a lot of our work is making sure that we're protecting the public. So this is a good opportunity for us to hear from licensees as far as any issues they're seeing in the field. Additionally, question 11 says, over the past 2 years, have you experienced any issues concerning telehealth, either through professional practice or observations of other practitioners? So that could be a good opportunity to collect some information about the use of telehealth or any.
My only comment on both 10 and 11 is the use of the word issues, because that's got a negative connotation.
Okay.
So what do you guys think? I need to go get some more water. Do we have to stop the meeting if the chairperson steps away for a second to get a?
No, if you're comfortable, we can just kind of keep moving forward.
Please.
Okay. You're right. And I think this is probably just some of this drafting was just from words I'm comfortable using. And so I probably just put in the word issues, but there are probably better words that would allow people to provide some positive or negative responses here.
Oh, go ahead, Christy. Sorry.
No, you, Kelly.
I was just going to say, even just changing it so it's not a yes or no question might help. Like, what are your experiences concerning telehealth or with telehealth? I don't know if that would prompt people to say what's going well and not well. I don't know.
Okay.
In terms of the purpose of these questions, is it to identify issues or concerns, or is it just to get a feel for what licensees think about the level of competence and telehealth in Kansas currently? Like if they're satisfied, if they're dissatisfied?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think where the root of this came from, on the social work survey, they were asking some questions about the switch from in-person supervision to telesupervision and the use of telehealth in general. And they said they've heard from a few people that it seems like there has been more positive aspects than negative aspects, switching from a lot of the supervision being done physically in person versus allowing it to be done over televideo, but they wanted to actually hear back more responses. And so that's where some of this was rooted. But then it was sort of, some of the issues that were highlighted just involved with supervision. And so we had a discussion. We said, well, some of this might be able to drive future work of the advisory committee if we could target some issues that maybe, at least for the BSRB, our main focus is helping people get licensed. We get some complaints, but something has to rise to a pretty high level before someone files a complaint. But if we can get some broad information from licensees, maybe we can have the advisory committees work on, greater access to information on areas where people are struggling, if there's some confusion about a rule or really kind of stressing something so that we can target the advisory committee work towards that. So I think that's kind of where it was rooted.
Thank you.
Okay. So like what has been your experience, positive or negative? Plus, are there any concerns or issues you're encountering in regards to these topics? You don't have to type that in, but just kind of rephrasing to understand what you're saying.
Okay. I will just kind of.
I can take a stab at that too, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Of course.
Yeah, part of this is, it's just, there's so much of these discussions, there's a lot of anecdotal positions, and a lot of the conversations, at least at the national level, talk about, it'd be nice to have more data, whether that is qualitative or quantitative. And so if you can get a lot of feedback from individuals and say, well, this wasn't just a random sampling of 5 people, we actually got responses back from hundreds or thousands of people, and they told us this, then that's actual, data that we can use and say, here's what we're hearing from our licensees. And so we want to help make things better.
And I don't know if you guys talked about this or not, but the question is phrased as if they have experience in the use of telehealth. They may not.
Okay.
And so we don't want our data to be skewed if they answer this and they really don't have any experience, or they're not using it or active in using it or whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Very good points. I appreciate this. Question 12. So KSA 74-7501, that is the statute that defines members of the board. And it says that it defines the categories of licensees that compose the professional board members on the board of the BSRB. Currently, the statute does not include a board member for the behavior analysis profession. Please describe value that would be added if that statute included a board member for behavior analysis profession. And I tried to phrase this and I know I'm kind of tilting the question to kind of say that there would be value in adding someone here, but I thought if it was simply a question of should there be a board member for the behavior analyst profession, the high percentage of licensees would say yes, there should. And so I was like, well, maybe if we can, pull more than that from them, maybe that would be something helpful for members of the legislature to consider if that was a board recommendation. So I'm not tied to the wording of this question, but that's kind of what my thought process was in terms of phrasing it the way that I did.
And I think that's what we were talking about before was let's get input from the field that will add strength to our recommendation that there be a position created on the larger board that represents our voice, right? Because right now we don't have, I'm the only representation that we have on that board, and it's only because I'm also a licensed psychologist.
Question 13 says, to assist the work of the board, the BSRB has 7 standing subcommittees called advisory committees, which are largely composed of licensees in each of the 7 professions regulated by the board. The advisory committees discuss topics relevant to the work of the board and make recommendations to the board on potential changes to statutes and regulations governing the profession. On a scale of 1 to 4, how familiar are you with the work of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee? Not aware, slightly aware, somewhat aware, or significantly aware. I wasn't sure exactly. I struggled with this question, but I know the volunteering that you all do is really valuable, especially making recommendations to the board. But since we have the YouTube channel, I really think this is an opportunity for us to have more members of the profession engaged and following the work of the advisory committee too. So, but I think there was a question at the last meeting that there's probably a lot of licensees that even know the advisory committee exists. And so I thought this might be a good opportunity to kind of highlight the advisory committee and just see, how many licensees are unfamiliar. And then maybe this would be an opportunity for them to become a little bit more aware.
I love this question, and I'd love to have a similar question for 14 in regards to the unprofessional conduct. So not just have you encountered any issues or do you have any concerns, but how familiar are you with the unprofessional conduct guidelines? Because I'm very curious about that question.
Okay.
That was one of the things that David and I had talked about with question number 14, because that BACB frames it in terms of here's our professional code of conduct, whereas our Kansas BSRB frames it in terms of here's our unprofessional.
Yeah, 14 says the BSRB is governed by the statutes and regulations in the state of Kansas, including the regulation on unprofessional conduct for licensees. The regulation differs from the ethics codes of national associations for the profession. Have you encountered any issues relating to the differences between these standards? So maybe take this language, how familiar are you with the unprofessional conduct regulations? And then as a follow-up question, have you encountered any issues relating to the differences between these standards?
Yeah, so the way you have it now, I think 14.1 should be the first question. What do you guys think? And that one's next.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Question 15 is kind of a catch-all. Do you have any other comments or feedback you think would be helpful for the members of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee of the BSRB to receive when evaluating possible changes to the statutes and regulations for the behavior analysis profession? So good comments so far in terms of the questions that were here. Any topics that were not covered here that you think would be helpful to include in a survey? I know we could always have a lot more questions. We don't want to have too many questions, but I think there is still some room if there are a couple more questions. If you have any topic areas in mind, any thoughts?
I don't know that this needs to be on there, but I did notice in the minutes from our last meeting, the suggestion about putting something about VI, or AI, whatever. I don't even know what it is.
Those are very different things, Pam.
I'm just, I just noticed that it was in the minutes and I didn't see that in the. Hey,
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to have data on who behavior analyst wise is using artificial intelligence in their day-to-day practice. So I think Pam has a good point on that, because if we're going to start trying to create parameters around it, we should probably know what percentage of people are using it.
Yes.
We might need to define that then if we're going to put that out there, because so many things now are calling things AI that may or may not be.
Correct. Like Google keeps bothering me about adding this Gemini thing that's AI to my email, right? It's going to
They
help.
also just made me use Copilot when I was like Googling how to fix my printer, and like Copilot, this thing is like talking to me, and it was very confusing. So I unintentionally used AI today.
Yes. Right. So like what I was going to say, stuff like that can filter in there too, and people will be using AI and, not part of their practice, but it's, part of their everyday stuff, because Google is, telling you how to finish your sentences in an email.
Maybe some sort of open-ended question here about how they're using it might help capture some of that too. That way, if they are thinking about it differently than we would, they might explain that to us. Because I think, I'd be more concerned about, like, are you using ChatGPT to create programs versus are you using Gemini to write a better email or something to run a more efficient meeting or something like that.
And I want to say that it's coming because all you guys know that we do training over here at KCART, and that there are like independent activities and open responses that people are supposed to generate. It just came across my desk right before this meeting that it's suspected that somebody used that to answer the questions.
I do have 3 different websites, Linda, that if you are interested in them, that detect AI.
Yes,
So
I am 100% interested. Please email those to me.
I'm sure we'll do that to you.
Thank you. I mean, like hot off the presses, it's like right before this meeting started, that email came in. I haven't even responded to it yet.
Don't get me wrong. I love AI. I love ChatGPT. I love it to write my emails for me, but I do have a detector too, especially from I do have a detector.
Yeah.
It's not from my behavior analytic practice that I used it, but anyway.
I would also like to include a question in regards to Pam's first acronym, DEI, in terms of whether whether the licensee feels that the board and the licensure process is culturally competent and inclusive. And I can draft a question there as well, but I think as DEI is people are becoming more aware, it would be good for us to know as well if folks feel that they're being represented and included.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the one question above there is really important as well, that I thought you guys would have a lot more to say on that topic than you did about, getting input on representation on the board. I was surprised that you guys were all so quiet.
Which question?
Is it 12?
About getting someone on the board. Well, I think we all universally
I know.
that is what needs to happen.
I didn't hear any cheering or anything.
And then my last suggestion for a possible question, but I don't feel as strongly about this one, so I'm curious what other people think would be kind of what the licensee feels in regards to the board and the committee representing licensees in Kansas. So kind of, do you feel supported? Do you feel like, you know, they're doing their job kind of thing, but said in a much more graceful way?
Could that, David, be like a, I don't know if there's, go up, would you go up, please, to, maybe 13? It's almost a subset of 13. How familiar are you with the work of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee? And, you know, so the next question would be if you, like, how, that would be how supported do you feel, or how, I mean, I think the ones we're talking about, the additional questions are a subset of this.
I can draft something as well for the committee to look over next
Okay.
time if that's.
Thank you, Christy. You are always so helpful. It's
Yeah,
true.
I agree.
Just the AI one. I don't volunteer to write that one. I don't know what to write there.
We'll have AI write that for us.
There you go.
You really should though.
Okay, well, you all feel pretty comfortable with where we're at in terms of the questions. We can clean this up, and yeah, I'll work with Christy, and we'll put together some different language for some of these, and bring something back for you at the next meeting.
Oh, good. We'll have old business. Thank you, guys. So I think that's going to be important. I think we have the good fortune of, you know, even though we're not still in our infancy in Kansas with regards to licensure, we're still at the beginning as compared to some of the other fields. And so I think being able to get this kind of feedback from our fellow behavior analysts in Kansas is going to do nothing but strengthen what it is that we have, and hopefully make us more responsive and be able to be something, you know, as more of a service. It would be nice if people were coming to us with questions that they have out in the field. And even know that we exist besides the fact that they send in money to get their license renewed, right? So, all right. So anything else on that topic? Nope. All right. Our next under new business is advisory committee membership. If you'll remember, we have how many, David? Refresh my memory. 3 that we can add, or 2 or 1?
So right now, your advisory committee, so the policy says that you will have a board member for that profession if one is on the board, and there's not a behavior analyst on the board. There's also a public board member who's a member of the advisory committee. And then it says for non-board members, there will be a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 10. And so right now you have 8. So you could add as many as 2 new members to the advisory committee if you would like to do so. And we did have the letter or the message sent out by email to all the licensees, asking them if they were interested in being considered for the advisory committee to go ahead and submit a letter of interest and a resume or a CV. And we did hear back from initially 4 people, and then we had 1 more person who submitted materials a little bit later. So in the original email that I had sent to you, there were 4 people, and then there was 1 additional person that I included in the materials that I just went ahead and resent to you all. But you should have that to look over. And also, I feel like when the advisory committees are discussing recommendations for new members, it's always helpful to kind of highlight some of the language that's in the advisory committee policy when it talks about recommendations for new members. So it does include some language in the advisory committee policy that says in reviewing nominations, the committee should work to ensure there is diverse representation, including but not limited to geographic setting, gender, culture, and ethnicity. Members should provide representation of the levels of licensing for that discipline, and those members should be selected from among public and private practitioners and educators. So it can be somewhat limited based on who chooses to apply for the advisory committee. I believe in the most recent list of applicants, I don't believe there was an assistant behavior analyst. So even though it says, you know, try to have some range between the levels of licensing, you are somewhat limited by who chooses to apply. But I also went ahead in that email that I sent to you and provided the current locations, or at least the locations we did have on record at the time, for the members of the advisory committee, so you could kind of compare the location of the applicant to the new.
Where is that, David? Because I was just thinking that it'd be nice if we had a spreadsheet that shows where we're all currently from.
Right. So I sent an email out originally back on July 19th. And then just on Wednesday about 1:43, I sent that email. And if you look at that email, below that is, I went ahead and forwarded my previous email. So if you just scroll down.
Okay, sorry.
You can see the individuals who had applied, and then their city, and then the current members, as well as what city they had. And I know, Christy, you have moved just recently. So so you now live outside of Lawrence. That was what I had done previously. But I think everybody else probably should be accurate on that list. If you're not, let me know and I can update that next time I go through them.
I can be the official telehealth person on the board.
Yeah, and so it basically, like we said, you know, there's 2 open positions on the advisory committee. The advisory committee policy does talk about staggering appointments so that not everybody comes up at the same time. These are terms that would last for 2 years. You are able to be reappointed for up to 4 terms. So anybody coming on the advisory committee here would be eligible for those 4 terms. But once their 2 years was about to run out, I would ask them, do you want to be appointed? And then it would be ultimately the chair of the board who's authority to appoint people. The advisory committee has authority to make recommendations to the chair, saying that as an advisory committee, we recommend these 2 people. And you can either vote specifically on candidates, or you can come to a consensus if you all come to a consensus on recommendations that way too.
I do have a question for everybody, I guess. So I'm thinking about, I see that one of the applicants is working for the same company. I believe that Kelly, you're working for, that you work for as well. And I'm also thinking about Allison and Nikki. And I know Nikki was a great addition because she's in the assistant licensure role. Do we have any concerns or thoughts about having multiple folks from the same company on the advisory committee?
I think Danielle is also at IDT, which Linda.
Okay.
So
yeah. So any thoughts or concerns there when we're selecting new recommended applicants?
I think that's a good point, because I think if you, I think, you know, there's no regulation around it. Just off the top of my head, 2 people from the same company, I don't think is a problem. But if you start getting 3 or 4 from the same company, then it becomes skewed. So, so, you know, I don't have a problem with 2 people coming from the same company. I think Holly Kramer she's an independent, and she's from all the way out.
I was just going to say, before we get to individuals, I'm
Oh,
in
sorry,
Darien,
Pam.
but
I
I
can't,
tried to pull up a map really quickly. Can you hear me?
yeah, just, I can.
Tried to pull up a map so I could look, like, I don't know where all the places in Kansas are in terms of having, generality across a lot of different diversity, I guess, across a lot of different aspects. Locations in Kansas is one of those, right? So I know we've got some Wichita folks, we've got a lot of Lawrence and Kansas City Metro, so to speak, or whatever. But where's Russell, Americus, and Derby? I can't find them fast
Derby
on a
is
map.
south of Wichita, and Americus
Okay.
is east of Emporia, and Russell, I don't
By
actually
the
know.
way, Russell
Not
is out there. It's out Salina area.
Yeah.
It's on like one of the towns you go through on I-70 if you drive to Denver.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
past Salina.
That's helpful because I think that's probably a good thing to consider too. Do we have in terms of representation from various areas of the state? And that's on the survey, right? Are you from a rural, urban, or frontier area of the state?
I think that's a really good point. And I think that's a really good point, Pam, and which is, so when I think Americus is like an eye blink, like when you're driving from Manhattan, Kansas to Emporia, Kansas, Americus is in between those 2 points. And it's like if you blink your eyes, you're gone. So it's pretty small. So when I'm looking at these just based on geographic, I'm looking at Russell and Americus as rural and like suburban, suburban, right? Like I don't know what the name would be for being really small. Is that considered, Russell is almost frontier. Americus would be rural, right? Everybody that knows where those places are, would you agree with me?
Yeah.
And Derby is all the way out. Is it past Dodge?
No, Derby is south of Wichita.
Oh, okay, south of Wichita.
I would say
Yeah,
it's
it's a
suburban.
suburb.
Oh, it's a suburb.
Yes, I'm
It's
about
part- it's
10
part of
minutes
Wichita.
south of Wichita. Yeah.
Okay,
It's part of Wichita.
okay.
We got a pretty good high school football team around that way.
They sure do.
So I think, so there's a couple of things we have. How many males do we have on this board?
Just the one.
The one. Thank you, Mike, for being representative.
And yeah, and David, but I don't think he counts.
Yeah, David, sorry, you don't count.
I believe my
Top,
my official designation is ex officio member. So I do not vote, but I am on the committee. That's true.
We're all pretty, well, Alice is non-European.
I want to step in here and just caution the board that in terms of gender identity, racial, ethnic identity, unless we have the individual self-identifying and sharing that information with us, there's not a lot you can assume just from physical appearance. So I just want us to be careful around
Thank
that.
you, Christy. Yes, I think there, yeah.
I also think that given the limited number of applicants, like you know what I mean, we don't have a general population that we're pulling from. I do think measures like location, levels of what's it called, licensee, like if there was an applied, an assistant behavior analyst, I'd probably trump. You know what I mean? In terms of the trying to get diversity, I think we need diversity in those things too. Location, levels of licensee, probably, in my opinion, are more important with a small number of people that we're talking about in a highly specialized field.
I was thinking also like population served might be good to look at. Like some of them speak to that in their cover letters, and that it would be nice to have people serving a lot of different populations to be able to contribute here.
Yep, I've seen some Fragile X. We've got people that have more professional appointments versus people that are more applied.
Yeah.
Some working with people with varying disabilities and mental health diagnoses as well.
I think that is an interesting one because that's not something that's usually part, like, I don't know, it's not autism specific.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Did you already tell us what of our group, like how many of us are rotating off the end of this year versus next year in terms of trying to get that staggered group?
That's a good question. We talked about that, and I think you guys are all on the same, except for maybe Emily.
I'll look that up real quick. I do have a master list of terms and when people join the advisory committees. So
I think,
Although I guess
Emily,
now-
you're close to an old timer with me, aren't you?
This is my second term, and I think I'm in my first year of my second term.
Okay.
I think I'm the same, Emily.
Okay.
so
And you
basically,
can have 4.
What?
You can
so
have 4 in your house? Yeah, go ahead, David. Sorry.
yeah. So basically there's 8 members of the advisory committee, and 4 are in their second term and 4 are in their first term. All the members are coming up on the end of their term at the end of June 2025. So no one is scheduled to come off the advisory committees for, I mean, you would have to seek reappointment for another term, but let's say that all members seek appointment and to their third and fourth terms. So nobody under that scenario would be coming off or would have to come off for a little bit of time now. However, it would be nice to stagger so that you would have some people that would come up on even numbered years versus everybody currently coming up on odd numbered years.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know if we were worried about forced mass exodus here soon or not. Okay, great.
That's a very long, uncomfortable silence.
See, around this time, I usually say, all things equal, it is more helpful to have an odd number of people on the advisory committee than an even number, just in case, for quorum purposes. But I really do need to compliment the members of your advisory committee. It is rare that we have more than 1 or 2 people that are absent. So I don't think it will be an issue whether you add 2 members or 1 member. So if there are 2 candidates you think would be good to recommend to the advisory committee, I would encourage you, feel free to recommend 2, because I don't think that issue will be as important as it has been with other advisory committees where it has been helpful to have an odd number to make sure we have enough to actually do business.
I would like to recommend Wes Dotson. He's in a rural area. He's very experienced. I have collaborated with him in the past when he was at Texas Tech. And he was a founding member of the Behavior Analysis Advisory Board in Texas and helped draft the practice guidelines for LBAs in Texas. So I think he has out-of-state experience in a similar area and could potentially bring some really nice perspective and experience to the board.
I was just going to say that I'm looking at his resume, and he's been licensed in 1, 2, 4 different states. And I just think that is a perspective that we might not have as represented. And he's also in rural Kansas.
And so we have enough spots for 1, did you say, David, or 2? Because the 2 I was looking at was Holly Kramer and Wes Dotson.
Yeah, you could also add a second member. You have 8 non-board members on the advisory committee.
I'll throw out that I liked Wes Dotson as well. I was impressed by the cover letter and the experience. I think it would add a lot to our committee. And it looks like he has a lot of experience across a wide range of populations as well. I also thought Alec Bernstein's experience would be interesting because he's coming from a hospital setting, which is rare, and a new area that behavior analysis is spreading. But also, I think, unless I'm missing something, he's primarily practicing in Missouri. And I don't know how much, I guess his knowledge would be for Kansas. That said, if we go the compact licensure route, that might be helpful to have somebody aware of Missouri as well.
Yeah. I'm thirding Wes Dotson. My interactions with him have always been positive, and he does bring a wealth of knowledge that I think that we will benefit from. And I don't really have an opinion on how many we add. I think that if I like David's idea of having an odd number, but it really doesn't matter to me.
I think we're usually all pretty much in agreement. In any of your experience, have we ever voted on anything split?
I think we tabled something because we couldn't agree on something. I don't think we've ever like voted and been split though.
Well, I'm open to whatever you guys decide. Do we
It sounds like we all agree on Wes. Can we just move forward with Wes at this point? And then I know next we're gonna put out for calls again next year. Can we reevaluate then?
Yeah, and we definitely can. And so when we send out, thank you, but you were not selected for this year, can we put in there that all of the applicants were very interesting? And there will be another call next year, and that we hope everybody will consider resubmitting their materials next year. Because I think it would be nice to have, I agree, I know several of these people, and they would all be really good members.
Is there any danger that, I know that none of us have to vacate our seats next year, but let's say, I don't know, life happens and several of us do. Is there a danger that we're not going to be able to get enough people to fill when we do this call, such that it would be beneficial to get 2 people now, so we have people available and like already involved who are interested now?
Kelly, I appreciate that point. I think that one of the challenges that we face right now is that the majority of you guys all are supposed to cycle off at the same time. And if y'all ended up like deciding not to be on the committee next time, you're right, we would be in a world of hurt. This could be the beginning of being able to stagger it a little bit if we accepted 2.
Then I also vote Alec Bernstein.
So, so how do we want to do this? Like take a vote? Because I would vote Holly Kramer, only because she's in Russell.
So the
which
advisory,
is all the way out there.
yeah, the advisory committee policy doesn't say the specific format you have to use. You can vote or you can do consensus. And so it just says if you do vote, you can't do secret ballots. That all has to take place where people could watch it in a public meeting like this.
Oh, so I can't say type it in the chat?
Right. So we actually have the chat disabled so that everybody can see the same thing.
Okay, so we're all in favor, general consensus of Wes Dotson.
Yes.
Do I see yes? Okay, thumbs up. So in alphabetical order, how many would vote for Alec Bernstein? 3? 4? Okay.
5. She came on camera.
All right, so everybody votes for Alec Bernstein except for me, and I vote for Holly Kramer.
Oh, I was gonna go with Holly
I
too,
did
but
vote, just to be.
Huh?
I did not vote, but I go with the consensus.
So, all right, let's call it again. How many are going to vote for Alec Bernstein? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Holly Kramer. 1, 2, 3. So Christy throws her vote behind Alec Bernstein. So Alec would be the second choice.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put together a letter that says the advisory committee is recommending Wes Dotson and Alec Bernstein for advisory committee membership, and I will, Linda, I will send you a copy of that draft letter before I provide it to the chair of the board.
Okay.
And if it's good to you, I'll send it to Dave Anderson. And according to the advisory committee policy, he has the ability to request additional information. But if he doesn't need any additional information, then the next opportunity to appoint members would be at the September board meeting. And so if appointments do occur at that time, then the first meeting that those individuals would have to attend would be the October meeting.
Sounds good.
Thank you for the good discussion on those applicants. Appreciate it.
I love that you said we don't ever not agree on something, and then the immediate vote afterwards, we were split.
I was just going to comment on that.
Yeah,
That's funny.
that was good.
Okay. All right, so let's see, pull up my agenda again. All right, so the next thing is, David, do you want to talk about possible recommendations to the board for the legislative agenda and what that would entail?
Sure. So basically, we've talked a little bit about, the advisory committee for the BSRB is created in a sense as a subcommittee for the board. And the advisory committee is designed to consider recommendations that have been referred to the advisory committee from the board. So you can discuss those things, or if there's other topics that are relevant to changes in law or statutes or the regulations or policies, you can make those recommendations and refer them back to the board. If there is going to be a change to statute or law, that is something the board would have to pursue in the spring by requesting a bill that would change those statutes. And so we wanted to add an item to the agenda because the next full board meeting essentially is going to be over that weekend where the board has the all-day planning meeting. And sometimes the items that are discussed at that meeting become part of the board's legislative agenda. So if there's items that you wanted to recommend as an advisory committee, we wanted to give you the opportunity to discuss those things today or make recommendations to the board. One example of that could be if you wanted to make a recommendation to the board to request a change to the statute to add a board member for behavior analysis. That would be something that would need to be changed in law. And so the board would not have the ability to change that in the regulations. That would have to actually go through the bill process. So that's an example of a change to statute. Alternatively, if you had a change to the unprofessional conduct regulations, or if you had a change to maybe some of the specific coursework, if that was outlined in your education regulation, you could potentially pursue that through regulation and you wouldn't need a change in bill form. But for items that would require a bill, this would be a good opportunity to discuss them today and then make a recommendation to the board so the board could discuss them at the September board meeting.
I've been preaching about this for like 2 years since I joined this, so I would love to start that discussion.
So is there somebody that drafts that language and then we look at it? Or
basically it would just, any kind of a motion could be forwarded to the board as a recommendation. So in terms of how it would look adjusting the statute, like let's say, for example, the board statute that outlines who are the professional members of the board. If you wanted to make a recommendation to the board to request a change to the statute to add a board member for the behavior analysis profession, you could just audibly say that, and then that's communicated to the board. And then if the board decides to say, we would like to make this an official recommendation that we will pursue in a bill, at that point, then I could take the statute and do the technical language. For us to introduce something before the legislature, the board would need to request that from me, or the board would need to make that motion and then give me direction to do that. And then I would need to talk to a member of the legislature, because they're the ones who can give authority to work with the revisor of statutes office to some of the technical details there. But as long as that approval takes place, we can work with them as far as the technical language. So today you could just audibly say any recommendations that you have.
Can you draw us a who does what here? Like, what do we need to do right now? We just need to verbally say we would like that to be a thing. Okay,
Yes.
I would verbally like to say that I would like to add a behavior analyst to the board. Do you also need a written letter? Because I can do that.
No, it's part of this meeting, Allison.
I second Allison's request.
Are we allowed to have thirds, fourths, fifths, and sixths?
I think maybe that could be in an all in favor, vote aye kind of format, but
Okay. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposition? Motion carries. There you go, Allison. See, we're all
Blessing.
back to being in agreement.
I love that. I also love that Christy was like both hands up.
Yeah. All right, so thank you, David, for that. And letting us know that we have the opportunity for that. And so that information, you guys, is important for us to know going forward, that we have more power and authority to be able to request changes that might affect our field. Because sometimes it's really easy on these advisory committees to feel like we're more passive recipients or passive participants. But we have the authority to be active and engaged. So I think that's really important for us all to keep in mind as we move forward, that we can be the change catalyst that we might need sometimes. So thank you for that motion and second and vote. Now, I think we're moving on to discussion on the regulation of artificial intelligence. Did you send that stuff to me yet, Allison?
I did not, but the BACB, I'm a little behind on reading these, but in July, the BACB also has their recommendations, and I was trying to read them quickly before you got there.
Has anybody else read them?
well, and I think it might be helpful. I know, Denise, it's your first meeting with this advisory committee. So this was a topic in terms of discussing the regulation of artificial intelligence. The board discussed this briefly, I believe, 2 board meetings ago, and said they thought it would be helpful for each of the advisory committees to have this discussion first, and then forward recommendations back to the board on how the board could approach regulating artificial intelligence as it came to the professions and also, licensees' use of artificial intelligence. And so for the behavior analysis profession, there is an association, the BACB, which plays a big role for a lot of our behavior analysts. And that association does provide guidance. We talked about on the survey that we have the unprofessional conduct regulation, whereas they put forward ethical considerations for practitioners and some of the difficulty when those things don't completely match up. But that association does provide a lot of other good resources for licensees. And so, so Allison, the document you were referencing in terms of artificial intelligence, that's from BACB.
Yeah, it was in their newsletter from July 2024. Like I said, I hadn't had a chance to read it yet, but I knew it was in there, so I was trying to read it. It looks like it's only like 2 pages maybe. Yeah, and it
And
doesn't really have a ton if what I've read so far. It basically just says like you need to be seeking legal counsel before using it, basically.
Is that something that's just for members of BACB, or do you think that's something we can distribute to?
I think you can get it online. I think it's open to the public.
It is.
Do you mind maybe sending me a link to it and I can send it to the rest of the members of the committee?
I can. I've still got it pulled up.
Thank you.
You know, not to speak for Alice, but she's a big proponent of AI. I wish she was here to be able to speak to this. So,
Do you want to table it until she can be here?
yeah.
I'll second that. I
Yes,
think
it's
Alice
a
has a
good
lot to add to this
suggestion.
conversation. So
Yeah.
We need some expertise.
Yeah.
In the meanwhile, if any of you do have materials you think would be helpful for the rest of the members of the group to review prior to the next meeting on AI, feel free to forward them to me and then I can send them out to all the members of the committee.
David, I'm going to send you these AI detectors too that I'm sending to Linda.
Thank you.
Allison, do you have like a quick link to that BACB AI?
I'll forward it to you real quick.
Thank you.
You know, it is interesting.
Optimal outcomes, right?
Yes.
On those survey questions, someone made a good comment as far as we should probably define at least a little bit what we mean when we talk about artificial intelligence. And that for sure has to be part of this conversation because there are lots of different possible definitions of artificial intelligence. And if we put out guidance, people may not all understand what we're putting out guidance for. Or if we were to put artificial intelligence into the unprofessional conduct regulations, but we don't make it clear, you know, what we're really referring to, then how helpful will that be? So we've also kind of had a conversation at a national level that if you do take that approach and you try to regulate it, and then there's a complaint about artificial intelligence, for board members to be able to review that and make a consideration, board members need to have at least a baseline understanding of artificial intelligence and how it all works. So it's kind of imposing a duty on board members to be educated in this area too. So, so good for all of us to learn more about AI. But it sounded like there was maybe a thought to go ahead and table the discussion on AI until the next meeting. If the board members, the new advisory committee members are appointed, one thing that will take place at the next meeting that will take up the majority of time for the meeting will be the annual training. Once a year, we do go through all of the information on the Kansas Open Meetings Act, the Kansas Open Records Act. So for some of you that are new to the board or for the new advisory committee members, that will be a good opportunity for them to kind of get a better understanding of all the technical rules. But we will still have time to talk about a few different topics too.
All right, so we have, so we're going to table AI, discussion on new business D, adding a description of our field to the website.
Yeah, and I'll frame this too. This was something that was brought up a couple board meetings ago, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the public members of the board and other individuals over time have said it can be difficult for members of the public to really understand these professions because of us overseeing 7 of them. And it would be helpful if we just had some basic language on our website that really explained a little bit more about what is behavior analysis or what is professional counseling, or, you know, the differences between the professions. And so we had received some requests to go ahead and add some of that under our FAQ sections on the website. A lot of that information under the existing frequently asked questions drop down has to do with information for licensees, which is valuable too. But since we do have public individuals accessing our website who may need a little bit of guidance, especially when it comes to, you know, standard of practice or filing complaints or things like that, the board was asked to consider some language as a general description of the professions that we could add to our website. And the board decided to refer that to the advisory committees to start that conversation, to come up with some basic language to describe each of the professions. So that's kind of how this got referred to the advisory committee.
So the question then would be, David and advisory committee members. Christy has already volunteered to wordsmith the survey. Do we have anybody that wants to take a stab at how much should we have, David? Like 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs?
So I think one or two paragraphs. I probably wouldn't go beyond 2, but I would say something like that would be good.
Does anybody want to take the lead on drafting 2 paragraphs for how we would describe our field to a naive consumer? And then we can discuss it at our next meeting and wordsmith it, because we're all pretty good at providing corrective feedback on written materials.
I'm not volunteering. I was just chuckling because I was like, well, AI can do that pretty easily, I think.
I know. Well, why don't we ask AI to do it and bring it back to the next meeting?
I can sure do that if you would like. I could do that literally right now. But if you want it original content, that's not me, dog. Sorry.
Yeah, and I can, there is one place that we could start in terms of this. It's definitely not the final product, but there is a statute that does have some definitions relevant to the profession. And I'm sharing my screen now, and that is KSA.
It's so bad. It's so
right. Like I said, it's not the finished, but here is what we're basically providing to the public in terms of a definition of behavior analyst. KSA 65-7502 provides sort of the technical terms. And so you do have an I, licensed behavior analyst, or LAB or LBA, means an individual who is certified by the certifying entity as a certified behavior analyst and meets licensing criteria as established by the board and rules and regulations. But like you mentioned, that doesn't really explain a lot as far as what that person would be doing, or
I mean, ABA is defined in letter A up top, but it's not a super parent friendly or consumer friendly definition.
Right, and this is for the public,
right.
Not the legislators.
Right. And these legal definitions or technical definitions do serve a purpose, and it is helpful. But for a layperson, that's really kind of what we're shooting for with this item. It's something that kind of goes beyond the legal or the technical definition, and something that someone could come to the website and just start to get a little bit more of an understanding as far as what an LABA or an LBA might be.
Right. And for those of you who were not around back in the day when this was first implemented, like if you look under H, it says means an individual who is certified by the certifying entity, right? Which that certifying entity is actually the BACB, but you couldn't put the BACB in there because we don't delegate authority to outside agencies.
And it does leave some flexibility in E that the certifying entity would be
right,
either the BACB or other equivalent nationally accredited non-government agency.
Which opens it up to the QABA, right?
Well, it opens it up for the board to do an analysis of any other association
that
put itself forward. So that, we talk about our licensing path for a lot of the professions. They either say you come from a national accrediting body recognized by the board, or you try to establish substantial equivalency by meeting the other requirements in the regulations. And so this is a little bit different than the other ones. The other professions don't list a specific accrediting body in the statute. They just list that in the regulation. So your profession is a little unique, and the statute does identify one, but then also leaves open the other equivalent national accrediting non-governmental agency.
Right.
So here is a starting point, but Yeah, this was last updated back in 2014, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying you need to update this statute. This statute does serve a purpose from a legal technical standpoint, but what we're really talking about is just some broad language we could add to the website to be helpful for the public.
All right, so does anybody want Allison to have AI generate a 2-paragraph description of behavior analysis that we can bring back to the next meeting? I see several people shaking their heads yes and thumbs up.
Can we nominate AI to be part of the advisory committee?
You know,
That's funny.
I don't know if it says you have to be a person to be on the advisory, but that's a very deep conversation that we'll have to table for another day. So.
Is AI a person?
And so I think the number E are broader topics for 2024. I think we could get, if we also tabled that one until our next meeting, when we have our 2 new board members available, they might be able to bring some new energy into talking about things that are going to be important over the next year. I know AI really is going to be. So, how do you guys feel about reserving item 6E, discussion on topics for 2024 for our next meeting as well? Yeah, okay. So are there any other items that people would like to bring up before we make sure everybody knows that our next meeting is on October 11th at 1 o'clock via Zoom?
I just want to say this feels like one of the most productive meetings that we've had.
It feels pretty
Like,
productive.
A lot done today.
I had a hard time hearing to start with. The seems to have cleared up a little bit. But thank you. And thanks for having a rousing discussion and also having a split vote. That adds excitement to everything. So thank you guys. Anything else? No?
Can I motion to adjourn? Is that what you
I'll
need now?
entertain that motion, Allison. Do I hear a second?
I second. Denise?
Denise seconds. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody want to stay longer?
Yeah.
I always want to hang out with you, Linda.
No? Okay. Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned. See you
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.